All right. Best recommendation for avoiding picky eaters. I have a 2.5-year-old and bribe him through every meal, it seems. What do you say, or how do you help parents that are in the midst of this? This is a little bit older than the bottom line for baby, but I think it is all in the same playbook of how do we help our child when they're having difficulty with being a picky eater per se.
Yeah, and I can speak to this from my own experience, but also just from some collaborations I've had with other people who are specialized in this area, including some occupational therapists who work for me at the Center for Connection. Picky eating is totally developmentally appropriate. We have to remember that that as we get older, our taste buds become fewer or not as sensitive. So when babies have, like, I don't even know how many, tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of taste buds. So every bite is like alive, just an explosion of flavor in their mouth. Textures, all of these things have a big impact on their sensory processing, and they definitely have preferences. So a lot of babies are picky eaters. We have to know this also, that in fact, I'm a huge fan of Catherine McCord, who has her website and Instagram account is Weelicious. I highly recommend it. She does beautiful posts and really creative around her recipes and presentation for kids. Her kids like grab handfuls of kale and just eat them. So I'm like, whatever you're doing, it's working.
That must be working, right?
She reminds us that, the first time you introduce a food, they might be like, ew, they don't like it at all. The second time they're like, ugh. Then the third time they're like, eh. The fourth time they're like, hmm. The fifth time they're like, yum, and we need to remember that we need to keep introducing foods. Don't make it a battle. So when we're bribing, when we're controlling and saying you have to eat that green bean or you can't get down, when we make it an issue, kids will be the winners every single time, unless you're willing to force food into your child's mouth, which please do not do. That's not helpful at all. We cannot control making someone fall asleep, eat, or go to the bathroom. So your child will ultimately be the winner here. So you don't want to make it a control battle. I also want to say that these early years are where our child's brain is wiring what the associations are around eating. And eating should be pleasurable. It should be relational. And most young kids, like 4 and under, have a hard time sitting for long periods of time at the table. I wouldn't force that either. As they get older, they can spend longer times at the table. But if we make it into a big deal that has if your child's having a lot of negative experiences, they're going to come to associate eating with unpleasantness. So then it becomes even trickier. So just keep introducing things. Don't make it a big deal. Don't make it like you care a lot, because the more you make it like you care a lot, the more control issues they're going to have. Keep introducing things. Check out Weelicious. But then I will say, if your child, and I don't have the exact specifics on it, but I have kind of a rule of thumb in my head. By the time your kid is like 4, if they will eat less than 10 food items, that's a time to get in touch with an occupational therapist that specializes in feeding and swallowing, because what they can do is they can provide other sensory inputs, like a weighted blanket on the child's lap or listening to a particular kind of music. So they can provide other sensory inputs that are pleasurable or positive for your child while they're introducing them to other foods. And then what they do is they kind of really help expand their palates, because typically when kids are like less than 10 foods by the time they're 4 or 5, that lets you know that there may be some sensory processing challenges or some dysregulation related to textures and those kinds of things. And it can be really helpful. I know many kids who, even at 10 and 12, would not go on sleepovers, won't go over to people's houses, won't go to camp, those kinds of things, because they're such picky eaters that just thinking about having to eat something other than their small handful of foods is really frightening and upsetting for them. That's the main thing we want to avoid, is for kids to have limited opportunities because they have such a restricted palate. So keep working at it. 2.5-year-olds are known for like being carb monsters. They love like the mac and cheese and the quesadillas and the, all of that. And that's perfectly fine. You just continue to do that. Have them, Catherine McCord would also say, let them be really heavily involved in picking the foods. What vegetable are we going to try this week? And I know it's hard right now with COVID. You're not really probably taking your kids to the store as much,
Sure.
but looking at recipes together, growing, if you can grow some things in pots or things in your yard where they're excited about, that tomato that comes on the vine, and then they can try it. So just, being, having them involved in it can be really helpful as well. What do you think about this, Phil?
I think everything that you said there is right on track. I like working backwards what you said. If by that age of 4 to 5 they really have a restricted diet, then definitely getting extra help and not just assuming they're just a picky eater. They're going to eat chicken nuggets until they get married and their spouse makes them, expand their palate or something like that. Like there are things that you can do to help at that age. At 2.5, totally developmentally appropriate to be a picky eater and to push too. Like I know that if I throw my lasagna on the ground, my mom or dad is going to make me chicken nuggets. Well, guess what? I'm just going to throw my lasagna or whatever I don't want to eat on the ground because then I get chicken nuggets. And if we know that they're developing well and they're nourished, then we can say, oh, it doesn't look like you're hungry right now. Let's just cover your food up. And I try and just keep it on the exact same plate. So if they had a blue plate or a green plate at dinner, just put it on the same plate, put it in the refrigerator. And then when they come back to you and tell you, oh, I'm hungry, then same exact plate. You can warm it up and then give them, oh, look, it's the green plate again. We're having the same exact food. And then they learn, okay, well, if I'm hungry, then I kind of at least need to try the lasagna before I'm going to get something radically different that I want. Another thing that I hear quite frequently is that they're great eaters at daycare and they are terrible eaters at the dinner table. And I just reassure parents that, one, that's totally normal. Two, they have the social pressure at daycare. Wow, Timmy and Susie are definitely eating their green beans. Well, I'll eat my green beans too. Right. Whereas at home, they don't have that same, they don't have their friends to see that they're doing the same thing and it's cool to eat green beans. And then a lot of kids just aren't hungry at dinner time necessarily. Yeah. So like you said, you can't force them to eat. And if it's adding to the stress, if it's adding to the frustration, if you're dreading mealtime every night, then we just need to take a pause and we need to say, okay, well, it looks like you're not hungry. I'm going to put your food away. Why don't you go play, or you can sit here while we eat and color if you want. And then if you're hungry, you just tell me I'm hungry and we'll get you your food out, and take all of the stress and all of the gain out of it, and see that, oh, eating is just another thing we do. It's more important that we enjoy it from a palate and texture and all of those things, and that we enjoy it as a way to connect as a family rather than the stress that a lot of people put into it. Because I expect my kid to sit at the table and wait for everyone else and say please and thank you and eat their green beans and wait after they're done until everybody is done and carry their dishes over. It's just a lot of expectations to have, and you're just going to find yourself constantly feeling like they're not meeting your expectations if that's the case. So
yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that having things be predictable and the same actually is really calming and feels good to us. Just like your kid wants the same book, or they want the same lovey or the same blanket. That kind of predictability and sameness is actually really regulating for us. You all may identify with this. People kind of have their signature lunch right now that we're all home a lot more because of COVID. The New York Times had an article about a little girl who had 57 quesadillas for lunch since the pandemic started. This was like in April or something, like it had been almost every day. And I'm like, let her have the quesadillas. I'm a go-to. I love peanut butter and jelly sandwich, so I'll make Same. That as my thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, really. Especially right now when the world is kind of unpredictable. Having those same meals is maybe a way for your child that's kind of trying to comfort themselves. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And another reason why when they're at home, they like to kind of have their routines and rituals, but they might eat more at daycare. So one other really helpful kind of hack is there's this great, you can make it up yourself, but I just bought this on Amazon. I've given it as a gift a lot. There's a thing called dinner games, and it's a little tin and it's full of little cards you can pull out. And they have a young child version that's from 2 to 7. And then they have an older kid version. My kids would be like, is it time for dinner yet? Because they were so excited to play dinner games, and it's just silly
that's so
stuff.
Fun.
Like one person, everybody closes their eyes except one person who has to pick something off the table and hide it, and everyone has to guess what's missing from the table. Or going around in alphabetical order naming an animal that starts with whatever letters coming to you, stuff like that. And as you're playing those kinds of games, your child is feeling delight, and it's a shared moment of joy. And when our kids are connected to us in that way, their window of tolerance is actually typically wider. So that would be a great time as you're having fun to be like, okay, it's your turn. Take a bite of your green beans before you give an answer. They might not even think about it. So having fun happening during the dinner can also be a way to get our kids to have a little bit more tolerance around trying new things or eating things that they typically wouldn't.
Love it. That's such good advice, and I'll have to check that out. That would be a great thing to add to our dinner table, which can be chaotic, but most of the time is a chance to connect and have good conversation and talk about our day, rather than focusing on eat that, or don't eat that, or you're not getting a treat, or you're going to your room. I mean, it's just, there's so many opportunities for stress that you can just take away if you change your expectations and your mindset around eating.
This I used to always think about how, like, if my husband was talking to me that way, like you just did during dinner, I would never want to have dinner with him. That would be just not fun. And so we just really want to make it pleasant. Another quick tip, I know we need to wrap up. Get those. You can buy them in bulk, like 500 of them for less than $10. Those white paper placemats that they use at restaurants. And put them on the table and have your kid make placemats. Or if you need something for them to do while you're getting dinner ready, have them decorate placemats for everyone at the table. So that's another just really good go-to that you can just pull out. It's another good hack.
That's a great idea. And it just adds something fun, something that we can talk about. Wow, look at this placemat that so-and-so made. Isn't that so neat? Let's see if we can put our plate right in the middle of it. All of those just opportunities to have our self-esteem and our confidence boosted as we sit at the table, and then associate that, like you said, with a wider window of tolerance for trying Brussels sprouts or whatever it might be.
And I was the kind of kid that loved lists and checking things off. No surprise for how I am now. So if my parent had said, draw on your placemat or make a list of all the foods we're eating tonight, and as you eat them, you can cross it off, I would have been eating everything to cross my list off. So that would be another thing you could try, depending on if you have a more type A kind of kid.
That is a great idea. Okay, that's one that I'm going to take home and implement at our house. Well,
let me know how it goes.
It's been so fun to talk through these questions, and we'll definitely do this again. And I would encourage everybody, I know that you've already had a lot of people get this book, and I love it, and I give it out to parents. I actually have a box right back here on the floor of The Bottom Line for Baby, because it just answers all the questions that parents have in the first year of life. And if you have a question, drop it in the comments below. Even if you're watching it in replay, you can drop a comment below with a question that we can cover on our next session, or text me. It's 402-256-0768. Thank you so much for being a part of this and for answering these questions and being such a great resource for parents, especially in this difficult time.
So fun always to connect with you.
Thanks for watching. Before you go, will you hit the thumbs up like button, because that will make me feel great and it will make you feel great too. Hit subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. And if you have a question that you would like me to answer, just text me. It's 402-256-0768, and I will answer your questions live in an upcoming video. Keep up the good work.